What's up? Today I'm going to talk about a project that I just wrote a post about not too long ago. This is in Centralia, Pennsylvania. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video. I'll be showing some pictures that I took when I was recently up there in late 2022. A lot of you are probably familiar with it, either through my page or through other places. But if you're not, I'm going to go ahead and just read a brief overview of what the situation was and why it's sort of an interesting situation. So, central Pennsylvania is well known for its long coal mining history. One of the most notorious mines was the Centralia mine. Mining began in 1856 and lasted for over a century. During that time, the small town of Centralia sprung up nearby, filled with primarily mining employees. At its peak, the town had almost 3,000 residents. Then, in 1962, a fire started underground in a seam of coal. Although there was some debate as to what ignited the fire, the consensus was that it was started when mining waste was being burned. Some have suggested that it started decades before and had been smoldering unbeknownst to the mine operators, but this has never been proven. A lot of people think this was just a way to deflect some of the blame from the people who were burning the mining waste. The full extent of the fire wasn't totally understood right away, but in the years following, it became much more apparent. Noticeable plumes of smoke and bad odors became increasingly common throughout the small town. In one of the more shocking incidents, a local gas station owner was checking the levels in his fuel tank when he noticed that the fuel seemed warm. When he dropped the thermometer in the tank, the gas was 172 degrees Fahrenheit. Firefighting efforts began in the early 1960s and continued unsuccessfully for decades. With the fire taking place underground and in the middle of a substantial seam of coal, little could be done to extinguish the flames. By the early 1980s, citing serious safety concerns, including fiery sinkholes and toxic fumes, the government began aggressively relocating residents. In 1992, the government declared eminent domain, and over the following few years, the town was virtually abandoned. In 2017, the population stood at 5. So today, the fire still burns, and the town is virtually abandoned. One of the more notable attractions was an abandoned highway, which you can see in this picture here, the Graffiti Highway. But that recently was covered up with piles of dirt to discourage visitors from coming. So now that you know a little bit about it, here's the aerial view of it, and as you can see, there's a street grid and very little else. You can see the evidence of lots of coal mining in the area, but as for Centralia itself, it's virtually been wiped off the map. Over here, you have where there's a place where you can see active smoking vents, and from what I've been told, they're more noticeable when it rains because I guess the steam is it's mostly steam coming out of it. But I was actually had the opportunity to go up there a month or two ago, and it's a really fascinating story, but it's there's not really much to see at this point. I got a couple pictures from I flew my drone around, and as you can see, the pictures are kind of crappy. There's not really much to see. Like down here is an old abandoned street, and let's see, lots of trees. Here's another one where you got like the old city block. So 30 or 40 years ago, there would have been houses in here and along this street and along that street. And from what I've been told, following the closure of the original Graffiti Highway, now there's a new stretch of road where people have started kind of going to graffiti it up. And I drove down it, and it's nowhere near what the original Graffiti Highway is, but it looks like probably in a few years it'll start looking kind of like the old one. But as you can see, the pictures are pretty underwhelming. There's not much to see. As far as I've heard people talk about the safety concerns and that type of thing. From my experience, I didn't really notice anything. I'm not, go at your own risk and all that kind of stuff. I'm not recommending people go, but I mean, there are a couple people that still live there, and there's active roads that go through it. And I mean, there were no visible outward signs of danger. Like I said, go at your own risk. I'm not recommending you go. In talking to a couple people who were out walking their dog, they said that in recent years, the signs of the fire have really died down. I guess back in the 70s and 80s, they said there were times where you could see the fire through the ground if there'd be a sinkhole or something, and you could actually see the fire underground. They said lately it's not much of that going on anymore, unless after it rains. I guess you get the steamy vents that are that I showed you a minute ago. But with all that said, scientists have said that there's the possibility, with given how much coal is down there, it could potentially be burning for the next 250 years. So that's kind of wild. But anyways, that's all I got. That's kind of your 2022, late 2022 update on what Centralia is up to. And really, it's not up to much. So that's all I got.